All right. Hi, everyone. So this meeting is recorded and will be uploaded to YouTube. Um, so yeah, just to follow up on Waze PR regarding the surfacing the field plugin name. I get that you changed the semantics, but the last thing that we needed to change is the name of the field in the diagnosis to be unschedulable plugins, not rather than failed plugins.
Oh, yes, yes. I missed that part. Yeah.
Okay, so we resolve this one and let me open
Yeah.
the.
So basically, yeah, to give a sort of very high level summary on that PR is that in according to that, to make efficient moving between different queues, we have to know which plugin in the pod failed by. And in the first PR, I introduced the failed plugin in the status object data struct. And Abdullah's idea is that if we only care about the specific status like unschedulable and unschedulable and unresolvable, maybe we should change the name to unscheduled plugin instead of failed plugin. So I think about that and think that maybe we should, in the very beginning, no matter the ladder logic is, just in the from the beginning, we should record whatever the plugin name it failed by, no matter it's abnormal error or meaningful scheduling error like unschedulable. So in the first beginning, in the status, I still keep the name as failed plugin, and but in the later logic, in the runtime, especially in the fit error, I will include a field called unscheduled plugin. So because fit error only makes sense uh, when you are doing some phase like pre-filter and filter. So it doesn't quite make sense if you return the abnormal error in our current workflow. That error is just be totally returned instead of recognized like an indicator to moving parts or sort of like that thing. So this is the change. So maybe you will be confused a little bit by the naming there, but this is the motivation doing this kind of change. So different places have different sort of thematics. Yeah.
So we have two items on the agenda. Mike, take it away.
Yeah, so I just wanted to talk about these two things. One's new, one is older, ongoing. The first one is for the descheduler. I linked an issue and a work in progress PR here that's just talking about trying to add what I'm calling informed strategies to the descheduler. Basically, have some strategies able to optionally run with an informer in their own separate threads from the periodic wait loop that is how the descheduler currently has to run, or as a cron job, basically the same thing. So started this PR just using the two node strategies as a starting point to get this pattern down. And so those are node affinity and node taint, those two strategies that just evict pods based on if the node's labels have changed or the node's taints have changed. So that's why I'm starting with those, because they are simple and only rely on like updates to node objects. But we have some discussion that's already going in there. One of the main concerns, obviously, with this Go routine threading is making sure that we can have data synchronized in a way that isn't different between runs, but has all the accurate updated information, because otherwise triggering on a new event run is not as effective. So that's the main thing that we're looking at, but there's also some design input there. I have more of the description in the issue itself and the work in progress PRs there. So if anyone just wants to check that out, give some feedback, that would be really great. This is kind of a change from, I mean, it's a big change from how the descheduler is currently designed, but it's something that we hear a lot of people ask about, at least I do all the time. People want the descheduler to immediately react to certain changes, and some of the strategies that the descheduler has, like pod topology spreading or like low node utilization, are probably too complicated to implement that. But you know, it relies on just too many different types of fluctuating events in the cluster to have a stable, you know, this is what triggers a run of the strategy. But I don't see why we can't have this kind of hybrid design where some strategies can run like that and others don't have to. So that's in there. If anyone wants to check that out, I don't know if anyone has any comments on it right now. But if not, I can go ahead and talk about this second item I have here.
One thing to note here.
Yeah,
I like this. I like that you're going that direction of, you know, rather than running it as a cron job, but reacting to events. And one thing to look at is what Wei and Aldo in the past have discussed, like that framework for, you know, event registration and whatnot. So you could probably benefit from the same ideas. So that's my feedback or suggestion, basically. And I do agree with you that, like, from first glance, like some strategies, it's going to be hard to react to events. You just need, because of their complexity. So having a hybrid approach makes sense. But for the ones that do, they could, for example, register to some events that they can, you know, react to efficiently. So yeah, basically my feedback is look at what Wei and is doing right now, and Aldo's doc from the past about how we do efficient requeuing. You probably you could use the same pattern in some way or another.
Yeah, I mean, that sounds really helpful. I'm not sure what you're referring to about what Wei's working on right now. Maybe I'm just drawing a blank on it.
I'll ping you the PRs and the.
Yeah, if there's PRs, especially if they could be linked in that descheduler issue as you know, reference for other people too.
I'll leave it to Wei as well. Like, Wei knows more about it, but I guess
Yeah,
you can point into the second PR where you are implementing these. You know,
I will link in the umbrella issues so you can find all the implementation PRs there. Give me 1 second.
Yeah, and reusing like whatever we can kind of helps with the other goal of like aligning the descheduler more with how the scheduler runs, which kind of goes into the next point here about cleaning up the scheduler dependencies that I had. If we're all good on the first one, I can just update on that. So this is an older issue that we opened. It's almost a year old now. We started the goal of trying to clean up scheduler dependencies on internal Kubernetes packages, basically with the ultimate goal of being able to independently import plugins and maybe even the framework sections itself in other projects like the descheduler, so that the descheduler could be tied to the exact same logic as the scheduler and create a beautiful harmony. So I just wanted to bring this topic back up because it's been a while since we really made a lot of progress on it. Think about those goals that I mentioned, if those are still feasible and what we want to do. The approach that I think that we really need to take to this, because when I started this issue, it's just kind of like anyone that finds any helpers, feel free to come in and just clean them up all out of the scheduler packages, which we got a lot of help and contributions from that, but it also is a little all over the place. And some of these helpers are touching a lot of different places in the code base, which need a lot of approvers. Looking at it now, I think that the best approach for this is to start at the plugin level. And I have some searches that have like some greps of the code base to see which plugins are still depending on other parts of the code base. a lot of them are actually, there are a number that aren't so tied in that could probably be pretty close to being able to be imported in other places without bringing in the rest of core Kubernetes with them. But there are some that have some tough dependencies, like some plugins. I'm looking at node resources right now. These node resource plugins depend on some feature gating, which is not easily made external. So I think similar to how not all the descheduler plugins will be able to be run informed, we might not be able to break the dependencies on all of these plugins. But the main point that I want to say is that starting at the plugin level and then working our way back is probably the approach that we want to take now. And I'll update this issue saying that and saying what I found about this. I opened a couple PRs the past couple of days just from that approach, starting with like volume zone stuff, just whatever small dependencies that could be moved. But yeah,
I have a couple of suggestions here.
Yeah.
One would relate regarding kube features. I gather that the most important thing is to have the plugins not depend on any other packages, right? So that this is the most important part from perspective of having external components,
right,
linking to the scheduler. You don't care about the scheduler core per se. You mostly care about the framework and the plugins. And so what I suggest here is for plugins that needs features, like depend on features, we should pass them as parameters somehow. Not necessarily as a plugin config parameter, like we don't want it to be part of that API. But I'm wondering if there is a way to pass them in as a flag rather than the plugin itself linking to the feature package. Just take a look at that. I don't know if it's possible or not without. The most important thing, if we want to do this, is not to actually include those flags in the config API. So that's one. The other thing is, have you looked at ways to automate this? Basically, maybe we should have an import enforcer somewhere in the framework package for the plugins that we know is cleaned up so that we don't regress. We enforce that they don't link, they link specific packages, and we prevent adding ones that we don't want. And then we keep updating the enforcer as we clean up, and so that you make sure that you don't regress, and you know where you are basically.
Yeah, that's a good idea. I don't know how. I know that Kubernetes has like these import restrictions sections. I don't know how to configure those exactly, but I know what you're talking about, and that's a good idea to prevent the regression. And what you said about the feature gating too, yeah, like a lot of these are really just checking like if this feature is enabled, then do this section of code. I'm sure that there's other ways that we could pass that in either through the API or through whatever flags we want to set, which is a good idea, and I'll look into that. So those are just my 2 points. Any feedback on there? I would really like to get moving on the scheduler dependencies section now. I also think that the more that we can clean up, like starting with the plugins and maybe going into the framework and breaking that out, because I think before we talked about maybe moving that to staging like last year. I don't know if that's still a plan, more of a long-term goal, but that would make compiling custom schedulers a lot easier. Like, you wouldn't need to depend on all of KK to write your own custom scheduler, and I don't think that you should. Just to simplify people's dependencies more and probably make images a lot smaller too.
Just thinking about this like quickly, I think, and Aldo can probably correct me, you could, regarding feature flags, you could change the internal type to add anything you want. And that wouldn't be like part of the API because it's not in the staging. repo where the versioned API exists. So that's fine. Like, so you could change the internal type of the of any plugin config to include flags to basically set the feature gates that you want to look at, and you should be fine.
Okay, yeah, that unblocks a lot of these to know that. Yeah, that's a big dependency for a lot of these plugins. That would be helpful other places. Cool.
Sorry,
Yeah, I'll
so
look into it.
you want to pass the feature gates to the APIs?
He wants to cut the dependency on the feature package so that like the plugins don't link that package in. And what I was suggesting is the scheduler itself will depend on it. Basically, when you instantiate the plugin, you could set these flags and fields that we add to the internal config types. Does that make sense?
Right. There is no other place, right? The constructors now only have arguments from the plugin config.
We could hack them the way that we did in the past.
Sort of interface, and then you deserialize to the concrete type.
Yeah, we had a hack in the past that worked, but yeah, I mean, either way, I think should be doable.
Yeah,
that was the old way, and when we go to a more strong typed system, is because of the validation and the versioning, right? So I'm not sure that is a good idea to use a very generic interface to. I know that in this way you won't be dependent on the sort of specific API versioning sort of things,
No.
but we also lose the benefit.
So the internal types, those are scheduler related, right? Like the nice thing about what we did, which is versioning those configs, is that we decouple the API, the user-facing API, like basically the configuration API, from the internal types that the scheduler consumes.
Okay.
And so if we change the internal type, that's not going to change anything. I mean, it's a hack, but it's not going to impact what we deem as a canonical configuration of the plugin from the user perspective. Because we're not changing the external one. We're not changing the staging.
I see your point.
The type in the staging repo.
Yeah, I see your point.
I guess I would be cautious because that the API reviewers still own those paths.
I don't think so. They're not on the internal types.
They do. I think they do have ownership over those.
No, the internal types are in the scheduler package, not in staging.
Okay.
But I mean, we should check if that's an acceptable pattern. Basically, slightly departing from the external one. It's just an idea how we can, plumb in these flags. The other one is again to encapsulate them. Like there would be like which I think it would be in the registry basically.
Mm-hmm.
You need to change the way that the new functions of each plugin, which is also a valid option, I think.
Yeah, I mean, the implementation parts, the details we can talk about in a PR, play around with different setups to see how it looks. I think that the point of what you're saying is that there's other ways that we can check these feature gates without having to link right out to package features and check, is this enabled? That's the point. Okay, well, that's all that I had to say on these two things. Please check out those two links, and I'll be updating the dependency issue with some more updates. If anyone else wants to keep helping out with that, look at the imports of the plugins and see what we can clean up. Thank you.
Sounds good.
That were the only two items on the agenda. Any comments?
So regarding those moves, Mike, I'm letting you take the first passes on them. So let me know when they are pretty much ready, so I can take the final look. But yeah, I'm not going through all the back and forth of the initial comments.
Yeah, that's understandable. I'll let you know. I just have I think that there's only a couple that are still outstanding. A lot of the PRs that we had opened in that issue are kind of been abandoned at this point, unfortunately.
Sounds good. I think I have a contributor that could help in 1 or 2 weeks. Yeah, if you think some of them are higher priority, that those that are abandoned, I think I can ask this contributor to do them.
Yeah, I think that this is a great first task for people, because it gets you into the code and seeing how it's all linked together, moving it.
Yeah,
good introduction.
Any other comments? All right, I guess we can end 4 minutes early. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, Beck.
Thanks, bye.